Dr. Matt, welcome to the Motivate Collective podcast. Thank you for being on the show.
I am thrilled to be here. I'd be thrilled to be here even if you didn't have a spectacular accent, but you do, so it's even better.
Awesome. I can tell you that having talked with Americans and also been a speaker, there's quite a D and a T, but the R's, you Americans are getting me to say R a bit more instead of R.
And one of these days I'll figure out how to say no like you guys do with there's an extra half a vowel in there.
I don't know. Like that?
It's like Nooer somehow. No. I don't I I lived in Coogee for 6 months and I never figured out that part of it, but Um, but I'm a bit of an accent sponge, so I can't help myself.
I'll ask about that in a moment, actually, because you work with neurodivergent things. And I'm curious, people say that neurodivergent people have an accent of their own. Do you think so?
It's definitely there's a particular cadence to how neurodivergent people talk. Like we tend to be a little bit more staccato. Like I say this, and then this, and then this, because my brain is uploading the words I'm wanting to say very quickly. Actually, you know who Barack Obama is a great example of that. Like
Really?
Barack Obama, because he's like, my fellow Americans, it's important that in these difficult times, it's like there's this sort of you can feel his brain buffering rather than someone who's like, I know everything I'm going to say and I'm going to say it, because we're always sort of building the plane as we fly it. So that's one of the reasons. I mean, we're both speakers, right? Like people ask me, like, "Oh, how'd you know what you're going to say?" I was like, "You think I knew what I was going to say?" I'm
Oh
just
my
so
goodness.
plugged in. I'm like, let's do it.
I have found my people. Okay, let's talk about that. I had no idea we were going to talk about speaking, but you talked about the accent and it all flowed from there because I just say anything, and most people, I'm not judging this, encouraging people to find their courage, but a lot of people will need to plan out what they are going to talk about when they are speaking to any group. And are you saying that there's something a bit neurodivergent about just talking and going for it and saying whatever words flow?
The key word there is the word flow. Flow is a psychological state that we reach where the challenge level and our skill level meet, right? So when people feel underwhelmed, their skill level is way higher than the challenge. And when they feel overwhelmed, their challenge level is much higher than the skill. But if both of those things are aligned, then that's where we hit flow state. So you could ask me to go give a talk on micro financial organizations in Micronesia, and I would fight my way through it. It wouldn't, because that's a high challenge, low skill thing for me. But when I talk about neurodivergence, it's high challenge and high skill because and so time goes away. And the idea that you can be a good speaker and be neurotypical because it's about transmitting information, and the information exchange can be done very well by anybody. But I think to be a good speaker as performer, that's where we get into letting your different brain fly, right? And I've given almost 1,000 talks all over the world, and I can tell you hand to heart, I don't think I've ever given the same exact talk twice, even though I've got probably a dozen talks that people ask me to give over and over and over and over and over, because the stories always change and the room always changes, and you've got to be able to think on your feet and be in the moment. And that's why when I work with neurodivergent people to build social skills, it's not teaching them exactly what to say, because people are inconsistent, right? They're not always going to respond the way you think they're going to. It's teaching them how to listen, how to respond, how to be nimble. And the best speakers, right, Melanie, they're nimble. They can roll with the punches. They can think on their feet. And the more we help model that for our clients and families and friends and coworkers, then we're making everybody a more adaptable, flexible group of humans.
Yes, definitely. The interesting thing about going with the flow when you present is that you are I think that we are skipping a lot of the internal dialogue and just going for it, which is ironic because often when we are a bit extra quirky, we can be very anxious in the rest of life. But I'm wondering
What?
maybe it's
Me? No, come on, what?
maybe not you. Okay, you're totally fine, never
I'm the
anxious
only one. Yes, I'm the only one who doesn't get nervous.
ever in life. Okay. Look, this is then we have the guru in not being nervous or anxious ever. That's good.
My gosh, yes. I mean, I always tell people like if I stop being anxious about giving talks, I'm gonna stop doing them because anxious means I care, right? I was anxious not only because I was running late, but I was like I'm always anxious to be on a podcast because like I value you
Really?
and what you do, and I want to show up as the best version of me, and there's still that imposter syndrome piece of like, why are they talking to me? It shouldn't be me. There's like so many better people. But here I am and here you are, and we're doing a pretty darn good job, I think.
We are. And that is insight for me because I am amazed by the guests I have been getting. I mean, you are such an expert and the others on the show. And every time I think, why is this person talking to me? Which is so odd because I grew up surrounded by people who had titles applied to what they did just because they did what they loved. But then I don't. So I think that the imposter syndrome can happen to all of us. And it's really nice to just, I think maybe what we do, maybe it's a neurodiverse thing, maybe it's just being different, but we simply do things anyway.
You know, and I think it's like as much as we'd love to do it over prepared, overcompensated, over rested, like most of the time you've got to do it under prepared, under compensated, under rested, like but the thing is like there is no perfect talk, like there's no perfect podcast, like there's no perfect therapy session. Like you just it's like really it's like you show up, you do the best you can, you try and learn from the stuff that didn't go well, and then you try and do a little bit better next time. And like I actually was just talking about this at the conference I'm at right now. I have a I have a recording of the very first webinar I ever did back in 2017, and I'm telling you, it's awful. It's the equivalent of someone reading like the poetry you wrote in middle school out loud. It's real. It's really bad. But like, as cringy and terrible and hard to watch as it is, I can also see in there the glimmers of the speaker I am becoming and have become and will continue to be. Right? Like, there's good stuff in there, but the thing is, it's like you have to start. Like so many gifted kids I work with are neurodivergent kids. They're like, how do I know someone's going to be my friend? I want to know they're going to be my friend before I talk to them so I don't risk being embarrassed or hurt. I'm like, yeah, man, wouldn't that be great if life worked that way? It doesn't,
Do you
you
find
know?
that about being a speaker as well? That some people will have whatever opinions about what you are saying or how you are saying it, and you'll change some lives, and some people will be distracted by life, whatever, but you're just doing what you do, and the result is whatever it is meant to be.
And I think a big part of that is giving yourself permission to grade yourself on a scale, right? I was on a podcast back in March, and I woke up with a nasty cold. I like I was trying not to throw up, like, and I'm on this podcast, and she's like, "So what do you think of this?" I was like, "Yeah, it's a good question." Like, I sound like I'm underwater, and I actually emailed her and when the episode posted. I was like, "Listen, I think it's great you posted it. I sound terrible. I don't." She's like, I couldn't tell. Like, I thought you did a great job." And it's like, I did a damn good job for functioning at about 25% of my normal capacity. But I think when you're neurodivergent, part of that is understanding, like, for all the parts that it feels like we'll never reach 100% of our capacity, there are parts of our lives that like 25% of our best is a lot of 100 people's 100% of their best, right? Like
What do
I,
you
you know,
mean?
like I work with a kiddo. He's an incredibly gifted musician. And, he's the kind of kid who can pick up an instrument and figure it out and play it. And he's like, "Oh, my violin playing sucks." I was like, "You picked up the violin yesterday, and your violin playing that giant air quotes sucks is better than 90% of the population, and you've been playing it for less than 24 hours." So
That
it's,
happens.
it's like on the days you only have 40% capacity to give, giving all of that 40% capacity is giving 100%. You can only give what you have.
I think that is empowering to everybody. And what we are doing is busting the perfectionism.
Right. Yeah. I mean, that's like I call my talk on perfectionism how to stop moving the goalposts. Because, if you're on the rugby pitch and like you're trying to get that try and someone keeps moving the end zone further and further, further, you'll never score. And you're just gonna get exhausted and miserable and unhappy and be like, why am I failing? Is it that you're failing or is it that people are changing the rules? And like we can't necessarily change if your partner or your boss or your best friend or Sydney International Airport changes the rules on you. There's only so much you can do about that. But when it comes to setting our own rules, we've got to give ourselves a lot more grace and patience.
We do. We need to have compassion for ourselves. And also, we need to forgive ourselves for rushing through a busy day. I'll ask about that because sometimes it's great to just talk about the realities we are in. And you are at a conference, you do a lot of talking. You also, what work do you do the rest of the time when you're not presenting to audiences?
So I'm a full-time clinical psychologist. And speaking was like a thing I did a little bit, and then it became my other full-time job. So because my practice is totally virtual, I can be somewhere and see clients, and my clients are pretty used to be like, "Oh, where are you now?" Like, "Oh, I'm in
Okay.
Mississippi, or I'm in Canada, or I'm in, Northern California, or I'm in my basement, which is where my office is back in New Jersey." Um, and it's funny because it's a constant juggling, and my brain that needs to feel really engaged likes that part. It likes the constant moving the parts and the chess pieces around the board. But I'll be the first to tell you it's exhausting. Like, it would be really easy to do one or the other of these 2 things, but my brain likes to do a lot of different things, and it scratches 2 very different itches for me, so, like, I try and make sure I'm living in a space that honors both of those, and I show up as the best I can in both of those places.
Definitely. Did you find that with the personality that you have, do you find yourself not necessarily overcommitting, but just wanting to do a lot and needing to find the limit in that?
Oh, it's definitely overcommitting. I think let's call it what it is, right?
Okay.
Because like, that perfectionism and that imposter syndrome go hand in hand, right? If I am the perfect speaker and therapist and author and husband and father and friend and then everyone will love me, right? That's really that's the psychology behind it. So like I've had to work a lot professionally at saying no, and like I hired other people for my practice so I don't take on every client and work 70-hour weeks. That's not sustainable. I don't show up as the best version of me for my clients if I'm dragged down into the dirt, right? So I'm like, listen, I fired good people on my team to take some people from me, to take new clients. And then as my speaking career has progressed, I've started saying yes to every speaking thing that comes my way. It's like the old line, like, if you've got too much work to do, if you're too busy at work, you're not charging enough. And it's like, huh, okay, right? Because if that's what it costs to buy that peace of mind, then like we all have to practice that. And like, listen, I'll be the first to tell you, it's easier said than done. I struggle with it all the time. But the way we push back on that perfectionism is by doing what I call bottom up thinking rather than top down thinking. Top down thinking is I've got to be perfect or else. I have to get 100% on this test. Bottom up thinking is the default of me doing anything is zero. I don't get out of bed today. I don't go for any run today. I don't record any podcast today. I don't see any therapy clients today. I write no words on my book today. If you write one word, it's a lot more than zero, right? And then the idea is like it becomes cumulative and aspirational rather than like the first thing you see is the mistake, right? And that is like many therapists, I have to practice what I preach, but it's been helpful to me in like reorganizing how I feel about my own stuff. Cause then, yeah, I show up as just as a much better version of me when I do that.
Yes. Do you think that along with being different and holding ourselves to our standard instead of you are doing more than what the average person will do, on top of that, do you find that in this day and age of personal branding, there's an extra layer of expectation?
Yeah, definitely. And it's a huge source of frustration for me because, you know, I don't want to make TikToks. Like, I don't want to put out, like, branded Dr. Matt content. Like, and the people are like, "Oh, you've gotta have classes, and you've gotta lead retreats," and I'm like, "I wanna be an above average therapist, and I wanna be an above average speaker, and, like, if I don't have, like, merch, my head will sleep just fine when it hits the pillow tonight." But because, honestly, I think it's dangerous when any client-facing work becomes about a cult of personality. Right? Like, listen, like I'm an above average psychotherapist. I'm good at my job, but I don't do anything. I don't have any magical therapy that nobody else doesn't have. What if I have a superpower? It's how to connect with people. It's connecting with neurodivergent clients because I am neurodivergent and I'm good at connecting with them. Right. But parents will call me like, you're the only person who can help my kid. I'm like, that's not true. In fact, it shouldn't be true. Right. But there are a lot of people out there, who are leaning the other direction. Like, yes, I alone will fix your depression. I alone will fix your autism. And it's just like, come on, y'all. Like that's not actually working for anybody. But by the time you notice that, you've given that person $2,000 and you haven't gotten any better. I mean, I think the thing that parenting, teaching, and therapy all have in common is that it's work that's fundamentally driven by humility. You've gotta be humble if you're gonna do this work, and that just doesn't like, a lot of people forget the order of operations there, and it's like, "Oh, my clients are so lucky to have me as a therapist." Nuh-uh, I'm lucky to have them as clients. I am so flattered and honored anytime someone's like, "Yes, come talk to me." I'm like, "You want to pay me to say words?" I have many high school teachers who would have paid me to shut up at some point like this. Are you sure?
Yeah, I can relate to that. Well, maybe not
No,
school,
I
but
can tell, right?
outside of
Oh my
is there
gosh.
actually something about us different people where we sort of become that annoyingly overly talkative one?
You know, and it's talking can serve many needs, right? And it can be a way of managing anxiety, it can be a way of connecting, it can be a way of processing. A lot of people I work with are like they're external processors. So they're just like, okay, hold on. Here's what I think about this. I'm getting my words together. And if you rush that person, they'll never say anything. But if you know they're thinking as they talk, then a great thing is like around the next bend. But you've got to be patient enough to get there because, once again, it's that nimbleness, right? Like you may not know what you're going to say before you say it, but there's good content in there and you hopefully have developed the skills to access that content effectively. you know? And I think that's why so many neurodivergent people struggle in like emotional arguments, like with their partners, because it's like, hold on, I'm trying to find my words and put them together. And it always feels like well, like how come you have exhibits and PowerPoints? And it's like, why do you have like, why do you have experts on call? And like, I didn't know we were having this argument until 30 seconds ago. Wait, slow down. Right.
Right. Right. People have experts on call. Yes, they do. Yes, I think that it can go in either direction. Let me know if this is spot on. Some people will either freeze up and they are trying to pick the ideal words, or then there are those of us who will just talk and talk and talk, trying to piece a puzzle together. Does that happen in other people?
Me, it at least happens to me. So there's at least two of us, but I know there's a lot more. And and the problem is that schools and businesses and a lot of public spaces aren't built to deal with that kind of thinking, processing, feeling. So what ends up happening is you end up yelling or blaming at the person, right? So like you'll say to that person like stop talking, and the person realizes gets the message, whether it's intentionally or unintentionally, that there's something wrong with them, that they're broken somehow. And then you internalize that and you take it to the bank, right? It's like, oh, I guess I suck. And and then that person shuts up or their flame, dims a little bit. And like not everybody should be able to talk all the time. Like that's not what I'm saying. But we have to honor different styles of communication. And the problem is the world is built for and by neurotypical people. 80% of the world is neurotypical, right? So it makes sense that the communication structures and systems and patterns ape a neurotypical mindset. So that absolutely makes sense to me. But the metaphor I usually use for this, right, is like, Melanie, if we were coming to your house for a dinner party, what would you cook?
Am I saying now what I would cook?
Yeah, tell me what you'd cook.
Okay. If it was a lot of people, I would, because I prefer plants and veg, generally, I would go with big burrito bowls, put it together yourself. So a bean thing and a whole lot of salad and some guacamole, things like that, and people can assemble their own thing.
Love it, right? And that sounds great as a dinner party. I love that. You're helping our veggie friends and our vegan friends. But let's say I bring my wife and my wife brings her sister and my sister my sister-in-law is gluten free. You gonna throw all those burrito bowls away because my sister-in-law is gluten free?
I think the burrito bowls would be gluten free anyway, but I see your point.
Right? And that's the thing. I mean, it's funny because usually people say like, "Oh, I'd cook some sort of meat, like chicken or fish or beef or something." And then it's like, "Well, what about my friends who are vegetarian?" Like, you made it harder for me, but I think we still got the point across. It's like we're not saying everybody in the world has to adapt to us, but we are saying please leave some room on the table for the things that we need to do that where you show up the best version of us. Because that to me is, I mean, that's how we enrich the entire human experience is that more people have more seats at the table and more turns to talk.
Well, that's why I picked those foods actually, because I'm actually now seeing a parallel between being meat free and gluten free and nut free. A parallel between that and being neurodiverse, because you're saying just build the world in a way that fits both. Because I've been to some community things recently where the simple solution, someone brought a tub of hummus, or there would be guac one week, or whatever it might be, or some chia puddings. And it was just whatever food. I mean, often there are those plates of the vegetable sticks and veggies are, everybody wants the carrot sticks to pretend they're being healthy for a few minutes. So that's just anyone. But why I think we'll need to talk about for a while later how the schools and the workplaces need to be built in a way that can truly include people who are different, because right now, at least over here, I'm seeing that separate schools are needed simply for people who are different enough to even have somewhere they can function and learn and grow. It's very separate.
Yeah. And, there's always going to be a tension between specific environments and inclusion, right? I mean, I want people to have places where they can retreat and be the best version of themselves, but we also can't silo off parts of society, right? It's a dangerous balance. Uh, well, it's a dangerous thing to consider, and it's a tricky balance. I mean, as a kid, I grew up going to a summer camp for gifted kids, and that was 3 weeks of the summer where I could be the most authentic version of myself. There was no masking involved in that. And then I went home and I had to be closer to what society needed me to be. And I'm not saying one is good and one is bad, right? Because, we ultimately we all need to figure out how to get along with each other. Like there's 8.3 billion of us on this planet, but we don't have neurodivergent countries and neurotypical countries. Like we have like, and that's why I always say, like, if 80% of the world is neurotypical and 20% of the world is neurodivergent, we're all going to keep running into each other, right? Like we don't get to cordon ourselves off. So like if you have a colleague who's autistic, you're going to have to find a way to manage a relationship with that person. Just like when I talk to parents in the pickup line at school who aren't neurodivergent, it is on me to do what I can to meet them in the middle and talk about the things that they want to talk about, if for no other reason to go along to get along. But hopefully I can find relationships and comrades and confidants in those things rather than just saying, well, you're not like me, so I don't talk to you.
Seeing another parallel of how we identify. Just like I don't always want to come out as being a particular dietary type, I also don't always want to come out as being neuro anything, because I always worried about being boxed in and people saying you are like this because you have this label. What do you think about people either outwardly identifying as some of these things or just trying to say, I'm different, I don't want to label, but let's see what we can do?
I parents ask me that all the time. They'll say like, well, I don't want my kid to be labeled. And so we have this expression. I don't know if you guys have it. Well, so like if you hear hoof beats in the distance, it makes sense to think it's a horse, not a zebra, right? Because horses and zebras look very similar, right? And they sound very similar, but horses and zebras need different things to survive. The problem is that a lot of kids are walking around that are actually zebras, but who've been forced to sit in horse troughs. Like they're doing what horses do, right? So you if you don't name yourself as a zebra, you're not gonna have all your needs met, and you're gonna wonder why you're struggling, right? But because horses need different things and zebras need different things. So it really, to me, like, I think that if you don't own your own labels, if you don't put a hand on that steering wheel and get proactive about it, society will label you anyway, whether you want to or not, right? Because I was identified gifted in grade 2, and I was diagnosed with ADHD in high school. And those labels have been good and bad, right? There's pros and cons to them. But before I got the label of ADHD as well, I had society gave me labels like scatterbrained and doesn't work to his potential and space cadet. And so, like, that's the thing. If you don't have to embrace every label given to you, but having those labels allows you to create an internal counter narrative over what other people will tell you, right? Like, like the concept in the autistic community of being, of the double empathy problem, right? For a long time, autistic people had a lot of people saying to them, you're autistic, you don't have empathy. And it's like, no, that's a sociopath, right? Sociopaths are a different thing. Autistic people have a different kind of empathy. They experience empathy in a different way. And the idea of the double empathy problem is that you might be expressing empathy to me one way, and I'm expressing empathy back to you in a different way. But because they're different, they're like ships passing in the night. You know, I show up with, I'm here to sit with you and listen. That's how I'm showing empathy. And you're like, how come you're not doing anything about it, Dr. Matt? But I'm like, but I did. I showed up. I listened. I did. Words, ears. I was here. But if you're expecting support looks like flowers, chocolates, and an all expense paid trip to Fiji, well, you're going to be disappointed. And I'm going to feel frustrated because I thought I helped. Right. So I mean, those communicative patterns have to come from a place of understanding. And if we don't understand ourselves, it's going to be real hard to help other people understand us.
We need to understand ourselves and explain to the world how we function and figure out a way to connect with other people. There's a lot to unpack with that. I'm hoping we can do a part 2 of this talk soon.
Absolutely. I would love to.
Great, great. So, before part 2, is there one particular lesson everybody should keep in mind for their upcoming week to help to understand themselves and everybody else?
So when I distill everything I do into one sentence, that sentence is be curious, not furious, right? Because most of the time people are doing as well as they can in as many things as they can. They're overwhelmed, they're overworked. So if I'm like, gosh, like, when I was running late before, right? Like, you'd be like, Dr. Matt's not taking this seriously. Dr. Matt is a jerk. That's getting furious. And when you first, you close off mentally and emotionally, right? That's all I'm going to think about that. He sucks, the end. If you're curious, I
Never
wonder
thought
what's
that,
going
by
on.
the way.
I
That's
appreciate that. I wouldn't have blamed you if you did, though. But if you're curious, you're like, okay, I wonder what's going on. And maybe the answer is that I didn't take it seriously and I was blowing you off. But there are much more likely explanations. Things like I was stuck in traffic and my day ran long and, right? So I just think that, like, it is so easy to get angry. And I get it. As a human being, I understand that emotion. But before we get furious, let's try to be curious. Because 99% of the time, that's a much better, kinder answer.
that's a slogan that I wish I had learned decades ago.
Yeah, I speak in bumper stickers, unfortunately, right?
Yes, but we need more bumper stickers. Look, thank you so much for this much wisdom, and I've honestly learned from every sentence. So thank you, and I look forward to talking again soon.
I can't wait. And yes, and thank you for having me. And seriously, you are an incredible host. This was, I mean, talk about flow state. I looked up, I was like, how have we been talking this long? It feels like we've been talking for 2 minutes. So hopefully the listeners enjoy us as much as we enjoy ourselves.
They will, and we'll set aside an hour and a half for later sometime,
Love it.
whenever
Let's
you're
do it.
ready. See you
Yes.
later. Bye.
Cheers.